Brilliant. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of slides to get through, and I'm not going to talk a lot to each slide, but this is just to locate where the museum is. This rather jolly photograph was actually when the Tour de France, the great cycling race, actually was done in the UK, and these are some cyclists whizzing past the Fitzwilliam Museum. But what I really just wanted to explain was that many of us are familiar, oh thank you, that's amazing, gosh look at this, with the very grandiose building. It can be a little bit off-putting, but it's not off-putting, so please do come in through the entrance once you've got your ticket and make your way in. I'm going to give you just a very, very quick potted history of the museum, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the collections that I'm in charge of, and then you get a sense of the diversity, the range of the museum. So it is thanks to the very handsome gentleman on the left of your screen, Viscount Fitzwilliam, the Honourable Richard Fitzwilliam, that the museum exists today. He was an undergraduate at Trinity Hall, the college that you see on the right. I don't know if any of you are associated with the Trinity Hall, but Viscount Fitzwilliam was up in the middle of the 18th century, and he had such a great time as an undergraduate in Cambridge that as an elderly man, he accumulated great wealth. He accumulated a very big art collection. This is just a photo of his grand house in Richmond upon Thames in Surrey. He decided to give something back to the University of Cambridge. I think he was rather appalled that Oxford, our great rivals, had the Ashmolean Museum, but Cambridge had no museum. So this is the front page of his will, written in February 1816, and he bequeaths to his beloved university his magnificent library, his books, as well as his collection of paintings, prints, drawings, musical manuscripts, and a few antique sculptures. And you can see here on the screen, it says that this gift of his art collection and his library was to increase the increase of learning and other great objects of that noble foundation. But he also left £100,000, which is a lot of money in today's money, but £100,000 200 years ago was an absolute enormous sum, and this was for the building of the Fitzwilliam Museum. So basically what happens is that after his death, the university is a little bit slow about deciding exactly where in Cambridge the museum will be sited, and also the style of the architecture of the building. So the museum has various houses, and in fact the original museum was temporarily in the Perse School in Cambridge, and this is a lovely watercolour showing, you'll see later, the wonderful Titian. You can see some of the famous artworks on the wall. But this was a temporary housing, and then actually there was a competition. They worked out the site next door to Peterhouse. It was designed by an architect called George Basavi in 1835, and the museum itself, although not quite finished, was open to the public in 1848. And this big a temple-like building known as the Founders Building was the first part of the museum to be built, and this is what you see dominating Trumpington Street. You see this rather crazy photograph taken during the Victorian period, the 1860s. You can see the very grandiose galleries that still exist today, but with this crazy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 painting hand. We don't do it like that anymore, but it was one way of getting around the fact that the collections were developing and there was not enough room to show all the works of art. So what's happened over the last 200 years is that, of course, the building has expanded with gifts and because of collections, but also the building. So this square here is the original Founders Building with the temple-like facade, an extension over here, and then we had an extension over here, and another extension. So we're on a rather confined plot. All of this is sort of Peterhouse around us. So the museum is quite constrained and bulging at the seams because we have a lot of artworks now and not quite enough room. This photograph here is the last of the building phases. This was done around the millennium around 2000, where you can see they closed in a courtyard and put a shop, a cafe, downstairs a lecture theatre, a schools provision. So this is the last big expansion, but we're hoping in the future to be able to do another building project. Very, very quickly, just about some of the collections. So as I say, the building blocks, the basis on which the Fitzwilliam, the collections are founded, is the founder's bequest. Viscount Fitzwilliam, as I say, died in 1816, and in his will, he left his own personal art collection. Now, on his mother's side, they were wealthy Dutch merchants. So a lot of the basis of the paintings collection are these wonderful paintings by Dutch artists. This is actually a lovely family group, and we think that this little girl in the middle here is Viscount Fitzwilliam's mother. They've got their dollies and their dogs and their posh sort of Turkish rugs. This is an amusing portrait of a pineapple that was grown in 1720 in the maternal grandfather's garden. So lots of wonderful Dutch paintings, and the Dutch inheritance explains that. Viscount Fitzwilliam himself loved the Italian Renaissance tradition. So we have a lot of works by famous Italian painters. This is that painting by Titian that I showed you earlier in the Perth School, and these were not inherited. I found and bought them during his lifetime with his money. So we have a very, very fine collection of works by Italian Renaissance painters. He also loved the medieval period, so 1200, 1300, 1400, 1500. He loved books. He loved illuminated, painted books. So we have a very, very fine collection of medieval, illuminated, painted manuscripts. And this is just a lovely detail of Adam and Eve in the garden with God and all the lovely animals around him. Fitzwilliam, our founder, also was very interested in prints, engravings, lithographs, etchings, and so on. So we have huge, huge albums stuffed full of really important prints. And this is just one chosen at random by Rembrandt, the great Dutch painter, but also printmaker, The Adoration of the Shepherds, just to give you a sense of one of about, I don't know, 100,000 prints that we have. Fitzwilliam was also really musical. He was a brilliant amateur harpsichord player. He wrote and composed music himself, and he collected music, original autograph music scores. This is the very famous Virginal book, but we've got original manuscripts by Handel and many other composers. And I'm emphasising this because in Oxford, all the books and all the music manuscripts and a lot of the medieval manuscripts would be in the library, in the Bodleian Library, and separate from the Ashmolean Museum in Cambridge. Because he was interested in learning and books, the library, the prints, the music scores all ended up in the museum and not in the university library. Moving on, as I hinted at before with the expansion of the museum over the last 200 years, why has the museum had to grow its site? Because it's grown its collections. The museum, as you can see, is often called a collection of collections because many of parts of its collections come from individuals. What happens is that individual people tend to collect something. So this is, with his wonderful beard, Professor or Dr. Glacier, a mathematician at Trinity College. He was obsessed by ceramics, but also samplers, these little pieces of material that young women would sew, but also Valentine's Day cards. So when Dr. Glacier died in 1928, we got this enormous bequest of ceramics, this beautiful early English Adam and Eve plate, which is one of something like 4,000 pieces of ceramic he gave to the museum, along with samplers and along with his Valentine's Day collection. Another curious fellow, James Stewart Henderson, who apparently went to Trinity College, and this is why in 1933, when he died, he left his collection of arms and armour to the museum. Now, there's been a bit of a question mark as to whether Henderson really did go to Trinity College, And I've tried to find out, and it looks rather as though it was a kind of a wish that he went to Trinity. But whether or not he actually did, maybe it's like a fanciful thing, but actually he did end up giving his collection of European arms and armour to the Fitzwilliam in 1933, and this is just an example of a beautiful Polish Renaissance helmet with a beautiful carving that looks a little bit like lace. So you say the Fitzwilliam Museum has 5 curatorial departments. My department, I'll say a little bit about that in a minute, it's also got the Antiquities Department, Ancient Egypt, Ancient Greece, Ancient Rome, things like that. The Manuscripts and Printed Books Department, where the Founders Library and the manuscripts are held. Coins and medals, a very focused department, but the biggest number of objects with over a million small coins and medals in it. A very, very big department, PDP, paintings, drawings and prints. And then my department, Applied Arts. You can just see, I've just sort of given you a little list here. Arms and armour, ceramics, clocks, watches, fans, furniture, glass, jewellery, metalwork, musical instruments, objects of virtue, sculpture, works of art and textiles. Most of our holdings are European, but we have good collections of Asian material, and we have a little bit of Indian material as well. So what I'm going to do now is really, really quickly, and forgive me, it's just an indulgent excuse to show you a few highlights from the different sections of my department, so that you can get a sense of the range, the scope. So if you go like, I don't like arms and armour, you might like something else. So this is a wonderful piece of Renaissance arms and armour that a few years ago I managed to get some funding to put this red and white so-called barding on the horse. I decided to honour Fitzwilliam. His colours of his coat of arms are red and white, so I thought, well, the German knight might not object too much to having this wonderful livery of red and white in honour of Fitzwilliam. This again chosen completely random, a wonderful, very important Renaissance helmet. And you can see sort of a lion's head here. An interesting story with this one, it ended up in the 1930s in a costume cupboard of an amateur theatrical society. And they were obviously using this as a prop. So when somebody was Julius Caesar, he'd whack the helmet on and say, I Caesar, whatever. And then the theatre went into liquidation, it went bust, it put its objects up for sale, and somebody came along and said, actually, this isn't a theatrical prop, this is an incredibly rare, unique helmet that was probably made for the Holy Roman Emperor himself. So it was brought into the museum in 1938, so do check out your local theatres. Again, just very quickly moving on to ceramics. As I say, in 1984, there was a wonderful donation of Korean ceramics from somebody called Gompertz, who had been an ambassador between Korea and the UK. And he wanted to kind of formalise and celebrate Anglo-Korean relationships. Now look at the date of that bottle, the first half of the 12th century. So we're talking 1100 to 1150, so over, 1,000 years old. That to me looks totally modern. 1100, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We have wonderful Chinese holdings. This is a wonderful imperial jar, what imperial marks was made for the Emperor of China around the 15th, 16th century, the beautiful Mandarin duck, an auspicious sign, and these blue noses. Big, big chunky jars. So if Chinese blue and white is your thing, come and check us out. We also have beautiful Japanese ceramics. This is one of these beautiful ladies, slightly later. But again, much of these objects were made for the export market. This is why they've ended up being collected by European collectors and ended up in the Fitzwilliam. We also have amazing European ceramics. This is a wonderful plate with lots of lovely lapis, blue and gilding, and a sort of a lovely plasticizing scene in the middle. This was made for Louis the 16th, so the King of France. So these very kind of important people. It's just one plate from one dinner service, but it's a beautiful example of Sèvres porcelain. We've also got, you know, English-made works of art. So these wonderful Wedgwood productions that were made in the late 18th century. I'm sorry I'm whizzing through, but it's just to give you a kind of a smorgasbord of options. This is a very curious object, again, blue and white, not made in China, made in Holland, in Delft, around the late 17th century, influenced by exported Chinese blue and white porcelain. And this is a flower vase. And when I saw this object, first of all, I thought it looked like some weird, I didn't really understand how it worked. So I thought that, again, going back to Amanda's point about trying to bring more people in, try to make the objects explicit, I would put some very convincing fake flowers into this vase so people would understand. So this was our wonderful ceramics conservator, Penny Bendel, and she's doing some work conserving the objects, and you can see how it comes apart, the flower vase. And then this is Nick Zolman, our technician, and he's measuring the size of the holes to work out what size flowers I can pop into the flower spouts. I went down to London. This is a wonderful florist, but all the flowers are made out of silk. They're not real flowers, they are pretend flowers. And I went along with an inventory saying, I know the sorts of flowers that would have gone into this flower vase in the 1680s. I need a certain type of tulip, a certain type of rose, a certain type of this. The wonderful florist picked me out some flowers, and then this is me turning into being a florist and Nick putting them in, and there you have the flower vase in the Dutch gallery with lots of sort of flower paintings around it, and I think that explains the object a little bit better. We also have some wonderful Islamic ceramics. Again, please look at the date, late 13th, early 14th, so that's like 1280s to 1320. Big dish, beautiful whirling fish around. You know, they are beautiful objects just to look at. You could come in and look at one object. Talking about sort of interesting links. So this is a beautiful ottoman, a Turkish Iznik tile picture. It's a vase with some lovely carnations, flowers in it. This was purchased in 1909 by the group, the Friends of the Fitzwilliam Museum. And the purpose of the Friends, that the money from the subscription went into an acquisition pot that the director could choose to buy works of art. And this was the very, very first work of art that Sidney Cockrell, the director at the time, decided to buy. And I find that interesting. It wasn't a work of art by a great, well-known British, you know, artist, maybe Turner or Constable or Blake. It was this Turkish tile panel. And I think it speaks to the historic and continued openness of the museum to other cultures and other societies and artworks in a global sense. And again, a beautiful Iznik jug or a cup with English mouths on it. This is a Renaissance piece made by a Turkish potter, exported from Turkey to London, in the Queen of Elizabeth, reign of Elizabeth I, and these beautiful silver gilt Mount Adams, a lovely fusion of a Turkish and English craftsmanship together. We have loads of clocks and watches and long clickers. So really just, again, in case timepieces take your fancy, we have drawers in the reserves of these beautiful watches. Sadly, not many on display, but one can make an appointment to come and look at them. Again, we have a wonderful collection of fans, Europe, Chinese, Japanese, and so on. This is interesting. This is from Mexico, around 1665, so-called Messel Ross fan. Look at those wonderful natural colour of the feathers. Beautiful, beautiful fan. Or this Balinese Indonesian fan, again, with some beautiful inlaid work of this figure. So just showing you the diversity, the range. Again, if furniture floats your boat, we have a lot of very, very fine furniture, particularly made in Europe. This is made by the famous French furniture maker Boulle, probably made for the French court. with lots and lots of gilding on it. And then you can sort of open the door to reveal all these beautiful drawers. So a really fine quality piece of furniture made for the French, aristocratic court. These are quite recent acquisitions. 2016, we celebrated 200 years from the death of our founder, the beginning of the museum, and we bought ourselves this wonderful birthday present. These had to be sold from Castle Howard, a big country house, and they were in danger of going abroad to, I think, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the British government put an export bar on and said, no, they should remain for the public enjoyment in the UK. We were able to raise the money and we awarded them to us as a birthday present. And again, this lovely sort of mirror frame, but I'm going to move on rapidly. Glass, a beautiful Egyptian or Syrian mosque lamp. We can date it very precisely to about 1355. You see these lobes, little hooks. They would have had chains, and there would have been a whole range of them running to illuminate the inside of a mosque. We have Venetian glass, beautiful little pilgrim glass. You see how thin on the side. This obviously the light coming through in this beautiful, clever way of the white glass decorating the outside of the object. We have a small amount of very beautiful Indian glass. One example of a hucker bowl from 1700. And lots of English glass with these beautiful coloured air twist stems, very cleverly made for these little drinking glasses. Or if you don't like the old stuff, maybe you'll like the modern stuff. Doesn't do much for me, but there we are. Lots and lots of jewellery, again moving really rapidly on, but this is a piece of 17th century jewellery or more modern jewellery, 1900. 1880, so lots and lots of different jewellery as well. Silver, this is a huge dish. They would have put rose water, lovely water scented with rose that you would wash your hands in. Perhaps you've been to a college dinner, but they still pass this sort of silverware around. This is a wonderful piece made in France. You can see lots of sort of river gods and waves and watery imagery appropriate for the rose water. You would clean your hands off. Or a very posh bread basket that you would pop on the centre of your dining table. Or this is actually, looks a little bit like a coffee pot, but actually this was made to hold communion wine in a church, during the communion service. So made in the middle of the Victorian period, actually when the museum was just open to the public. We have a few musical instruments. This beautiful Italian harpsichord, we recently conserved it to playing order, and we occasionally have concerts, and then you can hear the beautiful musical instrument being played. We also have some sculpture. This is one of my favourites, a piece of Italian Renaissance bronze. It's originally a fountain figure, and he would have squirted water through his mouth, and originally he held a little windmill, and the water comes out and the whirligig, the windmill would rotate. Made for the Medici family of Florence, so important patrons in the Italian Renaissance. This was a fairly recent acquisition, about 3 or 4 years ago. Small. This is the Virgin Mary, and she's got real eyelashes and real. These are little glass teardrops, and she's very small, and you can look at this sculpture for hours and hours. She's very beautiful. So if you're feeling stressed out, come and spend 5 minutes looking at the Virgin and you'll feel a bit calmer. As I say, this is just an interesting sculpture for me. I mentioned at the start that the founder loved Handel, and he collected a lot of original music scores by Handel. Well, this is a wonderful original model, about this big, in clay, that was made for a life-size marble sculpture. It was originally in a pleasure garden in London, and the sculpture is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum. But I think the founder would have been very happy that we have this beautiful image of Handel in the sort of a creative act. He's sort of strumming his lyre. There's a little putto writing down the music score. So I like the fact that this little piece of music is similar to the real pieces of music we have with Handel music on it. We even have 2 original Degas wax dancers, the only, well, we've actually got a 3rd one, but there are 3 in the UK, we have all of them. So that's very rare and wonderful for the Fitzwilliam. Again, a recent purchase, she was going off the Metropolitan Museum of Art again. We managed to raise enough money a couple of years ago. And so Alfred Gilbert, you may know him as the Eros in Piccadilly Circus, the sculptor responsible for Eros. Well, this is a rare, colossal, she's enormous, Queen Victoria, in marble. So again, it shows the quality of his work as a sculptor. Or again, something a little bit more modern. I'm going to whiz on through because we've got some textiles. Just again, these textiles are not all on view because they are light sensitive, but you get a sense of this is a sampler. These are the sorts of things that Glacier collected. Costume, we don't have much costume, but we've got a little bit. So again, this is my sort of penultimate slide. So really just to say, this is your museum. These are not my collections. I have the privileged job of looking after them. So it's free, okay, to the public every day apart from Monday. Do not come on a Monday, we are shut. And it is COVID secure, so you do not need to worry about your personal safety, but you must wear a mask when you go in. And finally, I say entry is free, but you have to click onto the museum website and you have to book yourself a timed entry ticket. You can't just walk up. In the past you could do this, but now because of COVID, you must book a ticket in advance. It doesn't cost you anything. You come with your mask and your ticket or proof of a ticket, and then you can come in. If you want to find out a little bit more about the museum, the events that are going on, or the collections, again, if you put Fitzwilliam Museum into Google, it will come up, and then you can work your way through. There's an object search and everything else. So finally, just to say that the Fitzwilliam Museum is one of 8 museums administered by Cambridge University. So you can see this is the Fitzwilliam Museum, the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, the Botanic Gardens, the Museum of Classical Archaeology, Kettle's Yard, the Polar Museum, Antarctic Discovery, the Sidgwick Museum of Earth Sciences, the Whipple Museum, the History of Science, and the Museum of Zoology. All these museums are part of the same consortium, UCM, University of Cambridge Museums. So if you want to look at animals or the gardens or whatever, again, that little website there will give you more information about all of these other, most of them are free, again, so there's lots and lots of wonderful things for you to do in Cambridge. Thank you.